Hi, welcome back. Thank you so much for joining me. Today we're going to take a deep dive into the road to the insurrection. We're going to discuss all the major players, and we're going to discuss whether Trump oversaw a criminal conspiracy as part of his attempt to hold on to power. So grab a cuppa and I'll see you in a minute.
We condemn the violence that took place here in the strongest possible terms. We grieve the loss of life in these hallowed halls, as well as the injuries suffered by those who defended our Capitol today. And we will always be grateful to the men and women who stayed at their posts to defend this historic place. To those who wreaked havoc in our Capitol today, you did not win. Violence never wins. Freedom wins. And this is still the people's house. And as we reconvene in this chamber, the world will again witness the resilience and strength of our democracy. For even in the wake of unprecedented violence and vandalism at this Capitol, the elected representatives of the people of the United States have assembled again on the very same day to support and defend the Constitution of the United States. So may God bless the lost, the injured, and the heroes forged on this day. May God bless all who serve here and those who protect this place. And may God bless the United States of America. Let's get back to work.
Thank you, President Pence. I don't agree with that man for any reason. He and I couldn't be any further apart ideologically or politically. But it doesn't even pain me to say that he was our hero and champion that day, and I didn't yet know it. At the time I watched the insurrection live, I, like most everyone else, had no idea about the behind-the-scenes political machinations that were occurring in the illegal scheme to keep Trump in office after he lost the election. I didn't know that Mike Pence had a death grip on the Constitution, not as a Republican, not as a partisan, but as an American. And he was refusing to let it go. He was standing there like, you take this Constitution from my cold, dead hands. It's not going to happen. He refused to let it go. And I cried when I watched that speech live, and it moves me still. I would give Pence a Medal of Honor for saving our country, at least for a time, until then, unless we get all this mess straightened out. But it wouldn't do him any good. It would not look good for the crowds that the circles that he moves in, for the Democrats to give him a medal. But I do believe that he does deserve a lot of recognition for what he did that day, now that the January 6th committee is releasing information and we're learning how fraught that day was for Mike Pence. I didn't know that he and his Secret Service detail and staff had been mysteriously locked out of their Capitol offices as soon as the insurrection began. When they tried to get there to safety, they couldn't get in. All of their access badges had been mysteriously deactivated. I didn't know that he was taken to a desolate garage somewhere under the Capitol, a loading dock with concrete walls and floors, just Pence, his family, Secret Service detail, staff, and oh yeah, the nuclear football, somewhere under the Capitol in a garage. I didn't know that his security detail was taking orders from agency brass under Trump's thumb, and that Trump's security detail sent a car to whisk Pence away. or that Pence had uttered 6 of the most chilling words that possibly changed the course of our history. I'm not getting in that car. The agents could have kept Pence under wraps, prevented the count from resuming, fearing he would be what? Kidnapped by the president and prevented from certifying the election for Joe Biden. I didn't know yet that Pence's national security advisor, Keith Kellogg, bluntly told Trump's hand-picked Secret Service guy, Tony Ornato, who was overseeing Secret Service movements that day, that Pence wasn't getting in that car. When Ornato told him that they were moving Pence to Andrews Air Force Base, Kellogg said, "No, you leave him where he's at. He's got a job to do. I know you guys too well. You'll fly him to Alaska if you have a chance." Why is this not a huge story? Vice President Pence and his Secret Service detail and National Security Advisor were fearful that Pence was going to be kidnapped. It's insane. It's nuts. You can't make this stuff up. I didn't understand why on January 5th, Chuck Grassley announced that Vice President Pence would not preside over the Electoral College certification the next day. And as the second highest ranking official of the chamber, Grassley himself would stand in for Pence. And he quickly walked that back when everyone started freaking out. I did not know the degree of bullying Trump and people like John Eastman have been perpetuating against Pence. You know, Mike Pence supported Trump through horrible atrocities and 4 of the longest and most miserable years of my life, because Trump was willing to employ Pence's agendas. The lesson here, of course, is that when you create a monster, you will eventually lose control of that monster, and it will turn on you too. But in this instance, as he later told the Federalist Society, he was doing what the Constitution said he needed to do, even though he didn't like the results. I didn't know it was Pence and not Trump who called in the National Guard, and that the only thing Trump was concerned about were the optics. He didn't want it to look like Pence was calling the shots, even though he refused to do it. It was Pence who, for all intents and purposes, was President of the United States on January 6th, while Trump gleefully watched and rewatched the insurrection, agreeing with the chanting crowd's demand for Pence to be presented so they could hang him from the noose they erected on the grounds of the Capitol. I didn't know that neo-fascist and white nationalist so-called militia groups had been planning to overthrow our government that day, that the Oath Keepers were storing weapons at a Comfort Inn in Arlington, Virginia, or that conversations between these extremist militia groups and key Trump allies had been taking place, that the Oath Keepers and Proud Boys had formed a criminal alliance that allegedly included a redacted figure planning the Save America rally on January 6th, with ties to Roger Stone and Allie Alexander. I didn't know that the Proud Boys had been bodyguards for Stone, for Alexander, Alex Jones, Lynn Wood, General Michael Flynn, Trump's disgraced former national security advisor and Putin's best friend. I didn't know that the unholy trinity of disgraced fools had become Trump's pre-insurrection advisors, with Steve Bannon evoking the beaches of Normandy, Michael Flynn making comparisons to Civil War battlefields, and Roger Stone of all people, calling it a struggle between the godly and the godless, between good and evil. And guess what side the greatest schmoozer and weasel in American history placed himself? I didn't understand the slimy details of how the Trump campaign attempted to illegitimize an election his own election security officials called the most secure in American history by launching over 50 frivolous lawsuits alleging election fraud and or irregularities that they all knew had not occurred and were dismissed by courts all the way up to the Supreme Court. At the time, I didn't know forged documents declaring Donald Trump the real winner of the 2020 election in Arizona and Michigan had been sent to and rejected by the National Archives, who turned the documents over to the January 6th committee. I had not yet learned that Clarence Thomas's wife, Ginny, repeatedly texted White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows urging him to overturn the election somehow, or that she was working fervently behind the scenes to overthrow a democratic election because she believed every insane conspiracy theory she could possibly get her hands on, and that she had personally contacted 28 Arizona lawmakers to urge them to reject President Biden's win. Team Trump did everything it could to bypass the 2020 election results in key swing states. I didn't understand why Trump had fired so many people from his administration after the election because they refused to clear a path for his scheme, and he replaced them with people who would. But even some of those would fail him and honor the Constitution. And when all that failed, they plotted to install electors who would vote for the president in the Electoral College, knowing that he had lost the election. So what was the plan? To get rid of Pence? Replace him with Chuck Grassley or some other sycophant who refused to certify the legal election? Who would certify the election for Trump then and there, throwing the process into chaos with fraudulent electors who would forge documents declaring Trump the winner from the key swing states? Or what former White House advisor Peter Navarro bragged about working on Steve Bannon with to implement, they called it the Green Bay Swap. The plan was to enlist members of Congress, put pressure on Pence to stall the election, the certification, and then send electoral votes back to the battleground states where GOP-led legislatures could try to overturn the results. I don't understand. There was so much that we didn't know then that we know now. And one of the scariest things, as far as I'm concerned, is now we know how close we came to the end of our republic as we know it.
Win, lose, or draw in this election, will you commit here today for a peaceful transferal of power after the election? There has been rioting in Louisville. There's been rioting in many cities across this country, red and your so-called red and blue states. Will you commit to making sure that there is a peaceful transferal of power after the election?
Well, we're going to have to see what happens. You know that I've been complaining very strongly about the ballots, and the ballots are a disaster.
I understand that, but people are rioting. Do you commit to making sure that there's a peaceful transferal of power?
We want to get rid of the ballots, and we'll have a very peaceful. There won't be a transfer, frankly. There'll be a continuation. The ballots are out of control. You know it.
Are you willing tonight to condemn white supremacists and militia groups,
Sure.
and to say that they need to stand down and not add to the violence in a number of these cities, as we saw in Kenosha and as we've seen in Portland.
Sure,
Are you
I'm willing
prepared
to do that,
specifically
but
do it?
Well, go ahead, sir.
I would say almost everything I see is from the left wing, not from the right wing.
So what are you saying?
I'm willing to do anything. I want to see
Well,
peace.
then do it, sir.
Say it. Do it. Say it.
Do you want to call him? What do you want to call him? Give me a name. Give me a
White
name. Go ahead.
supremacists and
Who would
white
you like me to condemn?
White supremacists and right
Proud
militia.
Boys, stand back and stand by. But I'll tell you what.
On January 6th, 2021, thousands of rioters, many coming from the Save America rally, stormed the U.S. Capitol as Congress met to certify the 2020 presidential election results. 5 people died that day, including 1 police officer, and 140 law enforcement officers were injured. It was later estimated that $1.5 million in damages were done to the Capitol, according to the Department of Justice. As the dust settled, President Trump was impeached for a second time for his role in the insurrection. And the ongoing FBI investigation continues to make arrests and file charges. So far, more than 700 participants have been arrested from nearly every state. Here's how the day unfolded. That morning, thousands gathered at the Ellipse near the White House to hear the president and his allies speak. Shortly before noon, President Trump addressed the crowd.
We will never give up. We will never concede. We're going to walk down to the Capitol because you'll never take back our country with weakness. You have to show strength and you have to be strong.
He spoke for little over an hour. Supporters then marched toward the Capitol as the president returned to the White House, where he wouldn't be heard from again until a tweet at 2:24 p.m. Initially, only Capitol Police were stationed. Additional MPD officers would be called to assist by 1 p.m. A large crowd approached approximately 5 Capitol Police officers, standing at a fenced-off entrance near the Peace Monument. According to ABC News sources that day, many Capitol Police were armed only with mace and their sidearms. As the crowd pushed the barricades over, the police were quickly overwhelmed. In contrast to other events in D.C. during the summer of 2020, additional state and federal law enforcement was not pre-staged ahead of the riot. Within minutes, protesters began swarming other entrances at the Capitol, breaking through barricades and continuing to push further toward the building. During this time, explosive devices were reported outside of the Democrat and Republican headquarters. An hour later, the police could no longer hold their line, and rioters fought their way up a temporary staircase built for the inauguration. The Capitol was breached for the first time at 2:12 p.m. through smashed windows in the Senate wing on the west side of the building. As senators sought shelter, Officer Eugene Goodman ran to head off the rioters. On his way, he passed Mitt Romney and told him to turn around. Goodman found the rioters and directed them toward the police backup, away from fleeing senators. Outside, Officer Brian Sicknick was sprayed with bear repellent and died the next day from a stroke, according to a medical examiner.
When Trump stood on that podium on January 6th, he knew he had lost the election. When Trump, Meadows, and John Eastman were bullying Pence to stop the vote certification, they knew Trump had lost the election. Every step they took, from the failed court cases to the fake electors to threatening Georgia election officials to sending his followers out to terrorize the American citizens who were counting the vote, to plotting with General Flynn and the My Pillow guy to create a situation that would pave the way for Trump to declare martial law and seize the people's voting machines. All of it was part of a coup perpetuated by the President of the United States to stay in power. Every Republican who tried to protect their oath to the Constitution was smeared and demonized by Trump and his people. Brave generals, colonels, service members, brave Republican cabinet heads, lawyers, administration officials. Lifelong Republicans were drummed out of the party or fled because of Trump. All that was left was a cult of personality. Trump and the people riding his coattails into Crazy Town. It was Crazy Town, I tell you. These Trump-publicans counted on the same resentful voters who were willing to suspend reality and belief to just follow whatever they were fed by their leader. And the crazy that these people allowed themselves to be fed is beyond whacked. We've learned from testimony from the January 6th hearings that he knew he lost the election. He was informed by everyone. His campaign manager, Bill Stepien, told him he lost. He said Trump grew increasingly frustrated with that everybody kept debunking his claims of election fraud, to the point where instead of believing what was real or accepting what was real, he just replaced his campaign legal team, which paved the way for Giuliani and the Kraken to move in. That's when Stone came back and Flynn came back and the My Pillow guy jumped in. Giuliani was, his head was melting and he couldn't stay sober. These were the people advising him. Trump was told by Bill Barr that he lost, and that the ridiculous voter fraud claims that were being made were bullshit. Trump was told by his polling experts that he lost. Richard Donahue, his former Deputy Attorney General, who he handpicked, testified that he told Trump all the conspiracies were false when Trump asked about these insane voter fraud theories. He told Trump the theories were not supported by evidence, and he noted that while Trump would accept one allegation was false, Trump would just move on to another conspiracy theory. He was just throwing everything at a wall, hoping something would stick. Everyone around him told him the truth. He didn't want it. He either got rid of them or distanced himself from them. And then he chose to surround himself with idiots, drunks, and quacks. And oh yeah, the Kraken? She's still being sued by Dominion for the outrageous claims she made about all the foreign countries controlling the voting machines, and Sharpiegate, and truckloads of ballots, and Trump votes magically switching to Biden votes. Accusations she said she had verifiable proof for. Proof that she has never produced. That she still has not produced. Proof that were the very damn reason so many people went to the insurrection. That's why they said they were there. Her accusations incited people to violence. And they didn't even care that she didn't have proof for the crap that she was spewing. She said in court since then to lawsuits meant to hold her accountable to her words that no reasonable person would take those to be statements of fact or to be true. What? Why is that not a story? The truth is, Trump tried everything he could to stay in power, and when every avenue failed him, he turned to his followers. And voila, an insurrection. The day after January 6th, John Eastman called one of Trump's lawyers, Eric Hirschman, who was his impeachment lawyer, still looking to overturn the election. Again, with another scheme regarding the Georgia votes. Still. They were still trying to overturn an election. Hirschman, he had had enough. He told him, the only thing I want to hear coming out of your mouth is orderly transition. And he made Eastman say it. And then he said, now I'm going to give you the best free legal advice you're ever going to get. Get a criminal defense lawyer. You're going to need it. And the poor, unfortunate fools who so easily fell for the Don Con, who allowed themselves to be used by the guy who activated their entitlement and rage to motivate them to give him their hard-earned cash and turn their backs on logic and reason. I mean, how did so many Americans fall into the cult? The ivermectin, John Kennedy Jr.'s coming back. That's truly what it is. Trump has all the characteristics of a cult leader, and his followers the qualities of a cult. From the all-consuming devotion to a single malignant narcissist to the daily consumption of alternative facts that immunize them from reality and the truth. I did not know that the most powerful tool of authoritarianism could be social media, and what a threat it could be. Or how easily our loved ones were changed into mirrors and clones of the cult. How seemingly normal people chose to adopt Trump's addled mental pathology is beyond me. And it's not over yet. So we'll have to stay tuned and find out together how this all turns out. Thank you so much for joining me. If no one has told you today that you're important and that you matter, you are and you do. And I hope you know that today. And have a wonderful day. I'll see you soon. Thanks.